past I've routed them, incarcerated them, cast them into space, but nothing ever stops them. They're like a disease. Can anything ever stop them?
Viewing figures were beginning to drop off about this time, and so we really needed to draw attention back to the show.
And we are in trouble.
I knew it was going to be difficult, but I contacted Mark Fielding to see if he'd be interested in coming back and guest starring in a special episode featuring the Two Dravens, called The Two Dravens.
And I got a phone call from David Moore one morning asking me if I'd be interested in returning to the show. If I recall, I was rather blunt with my reply. A simple no would have sufficed. We didn't make his Christmas card list that year.
Because that way they can maximise the use they can make of humanity, subdue them, experiment on them, and finally convert them. This place isn't just a spearhead for an invasion. It's a giant laboratory as well.
Now, I felt it was still very much Fielding's gig.
Too kind.
He had breathed life into the character so successfully that I felt I was still walking around in his shoes, you know?
We were about a quarter of the way into the third season when Rupert announced that he'd be leaving at the end of the year. Well, we've changed our leading actor once, we can do it again.
I was at a convention once, I think it was in Atlanta, and this fan approached me and said, in the episode The Claws of Death, how come the Chromac knocks you out so easily? Mark Fielding would have kicked its ass! I thought to myself at that point, yeah, it's definitely time to get out.
We were now in the process of finding a new Draven. We wanted to introduce him into the last two episodes of the season, save waiting until the following year. I mean, that way we could establish him much more quickly with the audience.
At the time, we had no assurances we would get renewed for a fourth season.
Ratings were at their lowest ever. I was desperate to cast someone who would instantly engage with the audience.
That was the past. This is the future.
So they offered me the part, and I was very reluctant to do it, you know. They showed me some old tapes, but it really wasn't my cup of tea. So I took George out to lunch a few times to discuss the idea. This would be good for his career, good for us. And after about 8 lunches, he accepted.
After George's episode had aired, I got a call to come in and see Bill Reed, the head of drama. I remember he sat me down, poured me a large whiskey, and told me that the series would not be returning the following year.
Well, that was happening.
We were devastated. It was a shock to all of us. Yeah, well, when I originally joined the show, I had no idea I'd be joining a sinking ship. Anyhow, I'd signed for the entire season, so they had to pay me. We'd started off with 14 million viewers in the first season, but by the end of the third, it was down to 2.
It was the fans that kept the show alive in the years after its cancellation. I mean, they've really been fantastic. If there's one effing fan, there's a million of them.
Oh, I've attended conventions all over the world and been totally astonished to see all these people who are so enmeshed in the world of Timequake. It's a very, very wrenching experience to meet a fan who's dressed almost exactly like you. And you know who you are.
Well, here I am on a lovely sunny day in London town, and I'm off to meet some fans of Timequake.
Who'd I prefer to work with? Fielding, Shaw or Kirby? Let's just say splendid fellows. All 2 of them.
When the series was released on video a couple of years ago, it was an instant bestseller.
There were magazines, websites, books, action figures. It was absolutely mind-blowing.
An American comic book company produced this wonderful graphic novel based on the original Timequake. And a company had gained the rights from the studio to produce these wonderful audio dramas. They got the original cast back to actually reprise their roles for new adventures. I was at home one night and I got a call from my agent saying that she had some good news and bad news for me. I asked what the good news was and she said that Timequake was returning as a TV movie. I asked what the bad news was and she said, but without you.
And even though David had created the show, he actually didn't own the rights. The studio wanted a fresh creative team on board and had struck a deal as an Anglo-American co-production. Although for David it was a creative consultancy role, which he politely declined.
When the TV movie came out a couple of years ago, all we could do was sit back and watch it like a viewer.
Don't look at this at all.
That was hard. It's like giving up your baby for adoption.
There's a lot going on that you're going to find pretty difficult to accept.
We don't have time for this.
Yeah, I mean, like the director had seen me on shadow sword knife fighter. And I don't know, I guess he liked it, and he thought I might have some of the qualities, you know, that would be good for this Draven guy.
We wanted to capture the spirit of the original series, whilst at the same time bringing it into the 21st century.
The things that attacked you now know that you're the one they're looking for, and they will stop at nothing until they find you.
We had a few nods to the past that I knew the fans would enjoy. We contracted Mark Fielding and George Kirby to come back to cameos.
It's only after I got the script though that I realised that I wasn't going to be playing Draven at all, but a rather small supporting role.
Deal with it.
I was none too impressed.
And when Mark Fielding realised he wasn't playing Draven, best days filming I ever had.
In this industry, you gotta take chances, okay? And because if you don't, you're gonna be one of those kind of guys who doesn't take chances.
They totally missed the mark with that TV movie.
What are you talking about?
I mean, look, you've got an American with an Australian accent playing a British character like Draven.
He became this ridiculous action hero who'd kick the crap out of somebody and ask questions afterwards. It was awful. I mean, Draven looked like Indiana Jones.
And they gave him a gun. Draven never carries a gun. He's a pacifist. He only uses violence in self-defense. What was that all about?
That's not your concern.
We asked David Moore to come on board as creative consultant, but he declined the invitation.
You know, I knew that there's a fan base for these things. I mean, there are fans with a capital F for freaky. I mean, it's incredible. I went to this convention and, you know, this guy, he kept coming back. I swear to God, he came back like 100 times. I mean, later on, I realized actually that he thought I was Mark Fielding, but anyway, the point's the same.
Keep it British. That's where the essence of the show was. If it did ever come back, it needs those basic ingredients to survive, I think.
Oh, there's definitely still an audience for it, and I hope that it comes back one day.
It'd be nice to see it return, but, you know, I doubt very much that it'll be with me. Hey, you know what? Never say never again, right?
I've been lucky enough to be working a lot over the last few years, but the things the fans keep asking me about is Timequake. It just seems to go on. We done?
I think it's had its day. It was a product of its time. If it did come back, I don't think it would work quite as well as it did before. Exchange.
Will it ever come back? Well, as Draven would say in his own unique way, it's only a matter of time. Right, do you want to cover the rest of my career now?